So we're going to begin by defining what anger is. Anger. Let's define anger for a moment here. Anger is the feeling people have when experiencing something unfair or painful or bad happens to them. It's a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. Vocabulary.com puts it as emotional arousal. Now, I could go on with more sources, but all the definitions the essays say the following about anger. It is an emotion, just like happiness, sadness, surprise. It's an emotion, something all humans have. Number two, it is negative provocation. Okay, it's usually provoked by a negative event. For example, it occurs when we receive or witness unfair treatment, humiliation, surprise, inconvenience, aggression toward ourselves or other people. And also, it is a strong emotion and can be a gateway to destructive behavior like resentment, hatred, revenge, or violence. Anger is a very, very common emotion. Everyone becomes angry at one time or another. And people say they don't get angry. Well, you ain't ever had to deal with your husband, have you? That's, the girls will think, and guys, I know, sometimes your wives will get you upset. Yeah, the public. Tell me about it. When you work in the public sector, that's what Rose was talking about yesterday. She was thanking somebody the other day. She was thanking somebody. We were talking to somebody at one of these shops we went to, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. I just said thank you and have a good day without even being provoked." I said, "See, that's what happened. That's a good thing that you learn when you're working with the public." But then you also have the other issue with public, because when you work with the public, you get to see all the good and the bad in people, don't you? Yeah, if you're in public service, you sure do. You honestly don't even have to go further than your couch at home. All you got to do is sign on to social media, and you'll see all sorts of anger on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram. You see all these people upset, man. They're always yelling and raving and screaming about some kind of injustice or some kind of moral atrocity, which actually ends up being just them being mad at somebody. Yeah, that's kind of what happens. For many, it's a go-to emotion. They're big or small. It don't matter if it's big or small things that don't go their way. They just get angry, upset, and bubble up in anger. You ever seen people with that face? Yeah, you know they're going to have it coming. They got that face. They're all mad and angry. Of course, there's a word for it, but we won't get into that. But that's what we say. We people we've got that angry attitude, don't they? They got an angry attitude. Well, that's kind of the way we look at people. There are different types of anger. There is hasty or sudden anger. Hasty or sudden anger, impulse when one is threatened or harmed physically or psychologically. It's a reaction of self-preservation. There's the settled or deliberate anger. It's a reaction to unfair treatment or deliberate harm by another. This can often be referred to as righteous indignation or a strong desire for justice. We have a lot of people that do and experience that today and kind of put that out there on their own. There's dispositional anger, dispositional anger. It is a character trait. It's somebody that is constantly irritable, grouchy, moody, and they have a bad temper. And then there is the other one, the fourth one, which is the passive-aggressive anger. It's this anger collected and stored from the small slights and insults that some people feel that others are unconsciously directing to them. Let me explain to you that. It's that feeling you get when you feel like somebody is looking at you. You ever feel like you're being watched? Kind of thing. Well, these kind of people think that everybody's mad at them for some reason. They think everybody's offended to them. Their reaction is to sabotage any effort to have or improve relationships as a way of punishing those that offend them. It's like I heard one preacher telling me. He said that and I brought this up a little bit last week, but he said he had a elder that had a chip on his shoulder for him, didn't like him too much. And he asked for one of the elders to ride with him to go visit somebody, and that elder said, well, isn't that what we pay you for? I mean, come on, guys. Ask for some help. He ain't asking you to give an arm or a leg or something. He's asking you for a little bit of time. Go with him and make sure that what he's saying is accurate, and on top of that, to be able to be a witness in case this person becomes, starts saying something that is not right. Because, if you ever, me, I try not to go to people's houses unaccompanied. I try to have company with me wherever I go. Try to take either a family member with me, or I try to take a church member with me to go visit them, because if I don't, something could be said. It'd get legally bad. So that's why we try to do those kind of things. So, like I said, there are people that are going to make those things. Now, the first two types of anger there are episodic. That means that they happen on occasion. They're not an everyday thing. They're not something you just go through. They're caused by outside stimuli. The third and fourth ones, though, are always part of someone's character. Not as a response to outside events. It's just the normal state of that person because they're choosing to be that way. You ever see people that choose to be angry all the time? Mercy, they just drip sadness and loneliness, don't they? They're just terribly angry, bitter people. No matter what type of anger or how angry you are, anger is sinful when it becomes the fuel to say and do things that are hurtful or wrong. Anger in and of itself is not bad. Okay? Anger in itself is not bad. It is a part of your human life. You're going to be angry. The problem is anger that sits and abides within you. You know what I'm talking about? That anger that sits in you and stews in you. Yeah, that's when it gets bad. Now, I know y'all waiting for some biblical examples of this. We're going to get into that. I want to start talking about Cain first. Cain in Genesis chapter 4, Genesis chapter 4, if you want to turn over to that, Genesis chapter 4, we're going to read verses 1 to 8. I want to talk to you about Cain and his anger. I want you to look very closely at how he got angry, what made him angry, and what caused him to do what he did. Look at it. Now the man had relations with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. And she said, I have gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. Again, she gave birth to his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of the flock, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And so it came in the course of time that Cain bought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. Abel, on his part, also bought the firstlings of his flock and their fatted portions. And the Lord had regarded for Abel and for his offering, but for Cain in his offering, he had no regard. So Cain became very angry, and his countenance fell. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? And why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but for you, you have to master it. And Cain told Abel, his brother, and it came about when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and killed him. Now, what took place here? What we know here, what we see, is that Cain's anger flared up as a result of rejection. God rejected his sacrifice. God let Cain know that his sacrifice wasn't acceptable. Why? Because he basically pulled stuff out of the ground and said, here you go, God. Abel, on the other hand, bought the very best of his stock. He bought the first fruits. He bought the best portions to God and gave it to him. God said, now that's a sacrifice. Because that's what a sacrifice is, giving your best. A sacrifice is not just giving you leftovers, it's giving your best. And that was what the problem with Cain was. Anger is a legitimate first response to rejection. We're surprised, we're hurt, we're offended. The problem for Cain, though, was how he would respond to this rejection beyond that moment of anger. Have you ever taken a test in school? When you were in school, did you ever take a test and you thought, I aced that test, man, I aced it. And you get back and you found you had a 65 on it or something. Boy, how surprised are you? How angry are you? Boy, I know. I remember I was a stupid teacher. I dogged them. They didn't teach me right. Stupid Robbie didn't look at the test questions right, so what it amounted to. And he didn't answer them right. But how do you respond to that? How do you respond to such anger? Well, you've got to know what God says here. God's trying to help Cain out here. He says, dude, listen. Your countenance is fallen, but just because you've messed up once doesn't mean you don't learn from it. When you fail, you just get better. You go and you do better and you get stronger. That's what God's telling him. Say, man, don't you know if you do good, your countenance will be risen or rise back up? You're going to be fine, man, if you stay with it. So what God's telling Cain. Cain's being encouraged by God. God says, don't do this or else. Bad things are coming. He said, anger is crouching at the door. Man, and its desire is for you. Whew. That's what sin does. It crouches. It lies in wait. And the more angry you become, the bitterer you become, the more bitter you become, the more you focus in on that anger, and the more you want, and the more you dwell, and the more you can't deal with the consequences. God warns of the danger awaiting Cain if he fails to deal with his sin. In his case, the anger he felt was a sign that something was wrong in his life, something he needed to change. Now we are never told what that is. We're never told what's going on inside him, but we know what took place. We know that in his heart evil was brooding because we see the actions and the reactions to that. In fact, John says in 1 John 3:12, Cain's actions were evil. What actions? What takes place next? Why he lets the anger brew and brew. That's what's evil. What we do know is that his anger festered and grew into hatred and resentment for his brother Abel, whose sacrifice and conduct were acceptable to God. All that repressed anger, left to boil, soon would look for some way to find an escape, a vent, a way out. The pressure cooker was ready to blow. And once that time came, he let that anger flow all over his brother Abel. And the next thing you know, he targets his brother as the cause of his rejection and ultimately kills him. In Cain's case, God's rejection and discipline led to anger, which gave birth to jealousy, which in turn created resentment. And this festering resentment drove Cain to murder. Now, before y'all start saying, well, I never kill anybody. I know you probably wouldn't kill anybody, but what does Jesus say? If you hate somebody in your heart, if anger gets you so festered up and angry at somebody and bitter at somebody that you hate them, you have murdered them in your heart. You've got to get right. You've got to change it. You've got to correct it. You've got to be willing to take account for the anger that's in your life. Don't let your anger become hatred. Don't let your hatred become jealousy or worse. Because the more you let that brew, the worse it's going to get. And Cain's an example of that. Now I want to flip over to Numbers chapter 20. Numbers chapter 20. I want to look at Moses for just a moment. We're going to look at Moses as an example of anger. Yeah, even Moses got angry. The writer of the Pentateuch got angry. Look at Numbers 20, 1 to 3. Okay? but we'll be looking at what takes place over 1 to 13, okay? Then the sons of Israel, the whole congregation, came to the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed at Kadesh. Now Miriam died there and was buried there. There was no water for the congregation, and they assembled themselves against Moses and Aaron. The people thus contended with Moses and spoke, saying, "Oh, if only we had perished with our brothers before if we had only perished before our brothers perished before the Lord." My goodness, if we only died when God had come down and blasted all those people, we wouldn't be in this sad situation now. Here we see another example of anger. We see what happens here. We see that people are upset and angry and festering because they have had something taken away from them. Moses led the Jewish people out of Egypt as God performed miracles among them through Moses and Aaron. Pharaoh eventually let the people go because of the miraculous plagues that God had punished and crippled his country with. Moses, despite the fear, complaining, rebellion, and lack of faith or gratitude among the Jewish people, continued leading them for decades. He led them. He focused on helping them where he could. Why have you made us come from Egypt to bring us into this wretched place? It is not a place of grain, figs, vines, and pomegranates, nor is there water to drink. And Moses and Aaron came in the presence of the assembly at the doorway of the tent of meeting and fell upon their faces. Then the glory of God appeared to them. Well, what happened? What took place? The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take that rod, and you and your brother Aaron assemble the congregation and speak to the rock before their eyes, that it will yield its water. You shall thus bring forth water for them out of the rock, and let the congregation and their beasts drink." Now I want you to take note of what happens here. Moses is told to do what? Talk to the rock. Speak to the rock. And it'll give you water. Now I want you to know, in Exodus 17:6, a similar situation took place, and God told Moses to strike the rock. But here he's telling him just to speak to it. What happens? Moses took the rod before the Lord just as he had commanded him, and Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly before the rock, and he said to them, "Listen now, you rebels, shall we bring forth water for you out of this rock?" Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came forth abundantly, and the congregation and their beasts drank. I got a question for you. What happened there? What took place? He struck a rock, right? That's what he did the first time. That's what it says in Exodus 17:6. He struck the rock. What did God tell him to do this time, though? What did he say? Talk to it. Speak to it. Speak to that rock. Speak to that rock. And water will come forth. He hit the rock twice. He's mad. He's angry. He's telling them, "You rebels, you heathens, you fools. Let me tell you something. I'm tired of all your complaining. I'm tired of all your whining. I'm tired of all your yelling and screaming and fussing and fuming. I'm going to take it out on this rock. Boom, boom. There you go. There's your water. Now shut up." That's what Moses is saying. There's your water. Come and drink, you heathens. He gets mad at them. He tells them, he scolds them, and then hits the rock twice with his rod. The water does come out of the rock, but guess what? Moses sinned doing that. First, he ignored what God said. God said, "Speak to the rock." He let his anger get the best of him, and he struck the rock twice. Now, Moses had been told to strike the rock once back in Exodus 17, but that's not mattering what God said. God said, "Do this right now." Moses let his anger get the best of him, and he struck it twice. The fact that he struck the rock twice demonstrated his further lack of trust in God's word as the great leader with disrespect of God before the people. I want to tell you something. Y'all know that Moses didn't go into the promised land, right? Y'all know that, right? You want to know something? That's why he didn't. That one event, that one thing, is what kept him from going in the promised land. I don't want to belabor it, but after 38 years of leading his people in the wilderness, we learned that Moses himself wouldn't enter the promised land. Soon after this, his brother Aaron would die, and Moses would spend the next 2 years preparing the people and Joshua for their entrance into the promised land without him. In his case, frustration led to anger. This anger led to a loss of faith, and that caused him to strike the rock twice. See what I'm saying? Guys, anger can cause a lot of issues. You don't want anger to keep you out of heaven, do you? That's why you have to let anger go. Anger has to be let go. Frustration has to be stopped. Because if we let that anger and that angst and that pressure build in us, we're going to do things we're going to later regret. Now, I want to look at one more case. I want to look at one more case in our word here, and that's with David. I want to look at what David went through in 1 Samuel 25, 2 to 42. Now, I know that's a long passage, but I'm going to summarize it for you here. This passage talks about a situation where David is letting his anger get the best of him and almost costs him a lot of stress on the throne, which he is getting ready to partake in. See, God had put David on the throne in 1 Samuel 25. At this point, he had already ordained that Samuel go and bless David to the throne and say that he has ascended. But the problem is the people hadn't accepted him as the king yet. One of the ways that he was to build trust with the people was by providing protection from roving bands of thieves and foreign soldiers who attacked the helpless farmers and shepherds who lived in the countryside, far from the larger cities protected by Saul's troops. One such guy was a guy named Nabal. He was a rich businessman who owned livestock. Throughout the year, David's men had protected Nabal's shepherds and herders. At the end of the season, David sent some of his men to collect a portion of the flock in return for his services. In 1 Samuel 25, verse 9, I want you to start reading there, because I'm going to tell you, it's going to blow your mind what happens here. Because David lets his arrogance get the best of him, I think. I think that kind of happens to us all at some point in time. You don't know who I am? Well, I'm going to show you who I am. When David's young men came, they spoke to Nabal according to all these words in David's name. And then they waited. Nabal answered David's servants and said, "Who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants today who are each breaking away from his master. Shall I then take my bread and my water and my meat that I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men whose origins I don't know?" And so David's young men retraced their way and went back. And they came to him and told him, according to all these words, David said to his men, "Each of you gird your swords." So each man girded his sword, and David girded his sword. And about 400 men went up behind David, while 200 stayed with the baggage. Uh-oh. To gird your sword means you're going to go and put it on. Get ready to go cut some throats. Get ready. We're going to go take this boy down. We're going to knock him down a peg or two. David's ready. David's ready to go. David's ready to whoop some butt. 1 Samuel 25:22, may God do so to the enemies of David, and more also, if by morning I leave as much as one male of any who belong to him. David getting right. David motivated. David is angry. He's motivated for the injustice of being denied what was due to him. He's frustrated. He's got frustration. His work would not yield any of the supplies that he needed to take care of his men and their families. And he was insulted. Nabal dismissed his claim to the throne and referred to him as a runaway slave. Slaves running around all over the place saying, there's this and there's that. You think I'm going to give any of my food to you all who I don't know who is? What's wrong with y'all? They went back home. Oh, David. Note that he is immediately consumed with anger. He gets in there, he gets hot, he gets fired up, and it leads him to seek revenge. The story then changes scenes and describes what Abigail, Nabal's wife, did to save not only her husband, but her household, and also to prevent David from committing a sin out of anger. She learns of the situation. She goes to be a peacemaker. Blessed are the peacemakers, right? This is why peacemakers are blessed, because they're the ones that are going to go on the front lines in the midst of all of these angry people and try to do what they can to be able to bring peace to the situation. And she learns of the situation, prepares the needed supplies that were originally denied David's men, and races to meet the young king before he arrives. Let's have a look at this. This is verse 28. Verse 28 reads, please forgive the transgression of your maidservant, for the Lord will certainly make for my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil will not be found in you all of your days. Should anyone rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, then the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living with the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies will sling out as the hollow of a sling. And when the Lord does for my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and appoints you ruler over Israel, this will not cause grief or a troubled heart to my Lord, both by having shed blood without a cause, and by my Lord having avenged himself. When the Lord deals well with my Lord, then you remember your maidservant. Ooh-wee. I want you to look at Abigail here. I want you to note how she goes and takes care of this. It's like defusing a bomb, ain't it? Guy cut the right cord. She apologizes and takes responsibility. She says, hey, this is on me. She brings the supplies in an attempt to make things right. She acknowledges the insults, but warns David about the consequences that would result in his hasty revenge. As king, he'd have innocent blood on his hands because of Nabal's stupidity. By asking him to remember her when he becomes king, she acknowledges his true position and submits to it. Now, we know the end of the story. David accepts her gifts and turns away from his plan. Abigail tells her husband that she did what she did, and he dies of a heart attack. Later on, we learn that David marries this rich widow, and his food supply problem is taken care of. The story of David and Abigail shows how quickly sudden anger and an immediate response to it can lead to disaster. I believe that the modern phenomenon of road rage works in this way. I really do. You ever get in behind the wheel? I think David was honestly going through road rage. You ever notice how 1 minute you're driving and you're not thinking anything about it, you're just going to work, and then somebody cuts you off and y'all find yourself screaming death threats at a stranger next to you? And they're flipping you the bird, and you're jumping out of your car, and you're wanting to bang on a window, and you've got a hammer, and you're thinking, I'm going to nail you right to the wall, boy. Yeah, that kind of happens. Heaven help the situation with the other driver, or you have a gun in the car. Because I know how that can go. It can get dangerous. But David and Abigail's story provides some really good lessons about what to do when you're provoked to anger. We can't eliminate anger from our lives, can we? If you think you can eliminate anger from your lives, you're wrong. I've been in ministry for 20 years. I still get angry. Happens. No matter who you are, where you come from. Preacher, you can't get angry, can you? Oh, can I ever? Many of you all have seen that. You've seen me get angry on occasion. And I apologize for when my anger gets the best of me. Those that have heard me get angry before, they know, and I've apologized to them. I want to be able to be saying, I'm sorry, I failed. And I did. I failed in my sin, in the sin of anger many a time. But there's some things we need to do. We always will be in the situations that cause anger in our lives. Sometimes God is using our anger to get our attention about something. Sometimes it's a sign of fatigue, weakness, or misunderstanding. Maybe we're tired. Maybe we need to rest. And other times it's just temptation leading us to sin. Prayer helps us to get past the emotion and the cause. Asking why I'm angry often takes the fuel out of the fire. And when you find yourself angry, here's a couple of things you can do to be better. First, pray. David, the chosen one of God to be king, did not pray or seek God's counsel before strapping on his sword. He just went out there and did it, didn't he? He jumped out there to do it. Our prayers in such situations should not be to ask God to take away our anger. It should be to ask, Lord, I need wisdom. Figure out why I'm angry in the first place. And to be able to resolve it, give it to you. Be able to help me understand why I'm angry. Help us, Lord, to avoid a foolish or sinful response to our anger. Prayer. Second, slow down. Slow down. Going too fast. No, it's not that you're going too fast, it's that you're burning too fast. You're going through things too fast. You're letting your decisions get the best of you because you're racing to try to solve the problem. Guys, we're terrible about that sometimes. We are so fixated on fixing the problem, we don't stop and slow down to realize maybe we can't fix the problem yet. Maybe there's something else we need to do. Anger usually causes us to react very quickly and say things that we often regret. Slow down. Get control of yourselves. You know, it was a good thing that David had a good long ride to get there before he went over to Nabal's house because it gave him time to cool off. Abigail popped in there just at the right time. I found that when possible, give something 24 hours to cool off. Give it 24 hours. Stop. Breathe. Don't let it weigh on you. I've let my anger brew for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's not healthy. It causes you stress. It causes you anxiety. It causes you to get worried, and you lose your focus. You lose your focus on God and who's in charge. Take 24 hours and breathe. You can't avoid anger, but you can avoid allowing it to create problems to put your day, or in your day, and to cause you to do something or say something you may later regret. Stop churning. You ever churn butter? You know, churn butter? You churn butter, what do you do when you're churning butter? Well, you're making it thicker. The more you do this action, the more you go up and down with it, the more you stir it around, the thicker your butter becomes. Because that's the problem. It's like what happens when we're angry. Churning butter or ice cream means to stir it, to mix it, and to constantly agitate it. And so that's what we often do with our anger. We start building it. We deal with the offense, the offense itself, the frustration, the insult, the injustice. We let all that brew and brew and brew, and we keep building and building and building and churning and churning and churning. And soon we're dealing with anger that's thick as molasses. You ever tried to move in molasses? You ever try to stick your finger in molasses and pull it up? It's slow, it's sticky. It don't want to let go. That's what anger does to us. It don't want to let go of us. We don't want to let go of it, and it just gets all over the place. I know it's difficult, but churning is what keeps the fire of anger burning inside us. Anger is an emotion, but it is also an emotional prison. It's one that burns, and the only escape is to let that fire die. Let it naturally be put out of the way. Paul says, be angry and sin not. Do not let the sun go down on your anger in Ephesians 4:26. Paul explains that you can be angry without sinning if you don't prolong your anger beyond the time. Not letting the sun go down on your anger means for a specific time or season. It's normal to be angry from time to time, but don't let your anger go beyond its season. Don't let your anger go beyond the point of where you are overloaded and burdened. Proverbs 19:11 says, a man's discretion makes him slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook a transgression. Slow to anger, right? Slow to anger, fast to listen. Slow to speak, right? Slow to anger, slow to speak, and fast to listen. What James says. It's not always easy, is it? There's one other thing you can do. There's one other thing you can do. Be your best Christian self. Be your best Christian self. BYBCS. Be your best Christian self. The hard part about dealing with anger is how to react to the things that made you angry in the first place. How do you react to people? How do you react to the thought of what's going on? We could spend a long time on it, but the short answer is to be your best Christian self. Be the very best you can be. What's your reaction to insults? Be your best Christian self. Reaction to unfairness? Be your best Christian self. Reaction to frustration, waste, incompetence, whatever might make you mad? Be your best Christian self. There's a lot of things that make me mad in this world today. My question to me, myself, is this. What do I need to do to fix that? How do I fix that? What do I need to do to put that down? Found that whichever sin that I'm going to, whatever's at the door, revealing or prompting me to anger, I have never gotten into trouble and often have resolved the issue by simply being my best Christian self. I encourage you to be your best Christian self. Now, I might be talking a foreign language to some people. How can you be the best Christian self if you're not a Christian to begin with? Maybe you're dealing with anger right now. Maybe you're dealing with the frustration and the sorrow of sin. You can overcome it. You can beat it. The best way to beat it is with God. God listens to you. God wants to help you. Look at how God was helping Cain. He was helping Cain to be able to deal with his anger. Guess what? If he's willing to deal with Cain, he's willing to deal with you. Be your best Christian self. Become a Christian is to become what God wants you to be. He knows you're not going to be perfect, but he knows you're going to try your best. That's what we do. How do you become a Christian? How do you become the best Christian you can be? Well, the first thing you do is you have to be a Christian. That means you got to believe in Jesus Christ. You've got to repent of your sin. If anger is what your sin is the sin that's causing you to fall away from God, get rid of that anger. Let go of that anger. Take time out to pray for the wisdom that God can give you to overcome that anger, and be willing to repent of the sin of anger that this anger is building in you and causing you to do. And go and believe in God and give it to him. Confess Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. Give him your burden and confess him before all men as the means by which you have hope. And be baptized for the forgiveness of sin. Put that old man away. Bury him. He's done. Come up in the newness of life. Be changed and transformed in the name of Jesus.